Good morning, Michael.
Morning, Jenny White.
How are you?
Good. You seem to be awfully smiley this morning. Happy. There we go.
Doing a little dance.
You're definitely happy.
So, do you know why I'm happy?
Well, I could take a guess.
Okay, well, guess away, my friend.
Sold your farm for $10 million.
That would make me happy.
Yeah,
Yes.
I know it would.
So long it was not to the OTA. Yes, that would make me happy.
Yeah, we had some great elections yesterday.
We did. We had elections yesterday.
Well, I think so. I can look at my text messages and see that everybody's texting me, "Oh, I forgot to vote," and I was like, "Well, that's how we lose school board elections."
Please tell me that you're just joking.
No, I'm not joking. I can go bring it up right now.
Oh, no, no. Oh, gosh. Well, I have to say, we only had just one thing on the ballot, and that was Corporation Commission in Lutheran. So I was like, oh, do it, because I had a meeting last night. We'll talk briefly about that too. And I was like, I'm gonna be late to the meeting. Should I? And I was like, yes, you have to go vote, even though there's one thing on there. And I didn't win but that's okay. I voted for Ray and not Bingman, but that's okay. So who's the biggest win of the day?
Probably whoever's running against McCourtney, I guess.
Mr. Wingard.
Yeah.
Mr. Wingard, who beat Greg McCourtney, the predetermined
pro
tem of the Senate.
Mr. Establishment.
Which has been Mr. McCourtney, who had only 10% of any money that he got in his campaign come from his district.
Yeah.
He was a chamber guy. Remember, I wrote the whole podcast about the chambers PAC sending out, tell Greg McCourtney how much you appreciate him. I think people saw through that. But not only that, I do want to shout out, there is a group of ladies, and I went to speak to them on Monday about what happened with me at the election board. And it was the South Tulsa Republican women. And I know there was a group of them that were actually going down to Ada that were walking for Mr. Wingard against Mr. McCourtney.
Good.
And you're like, I think people don't understand that. Go help people in other districts that they need it. Because, like our friend Matt Huggins, he lost against Cynthia Rowe, who had points thing of the money coming out of her district. So, that we should have had a little bit in there. But our friend Kendall Sacchieri.
Yeah, Kendall's awesome. Kendall is the exact kind of person we need in there.
She 51 plus. So it wasn't like, maybe she just squeaked by. But I think 51 plus in a down election because we had such low voter turnout. And then our former board member and friend Molly Jenkins won outright. She beat, I don't know why I can't think of his name, Talley. Representative Talley, she beat him by 60% of the vote, and she doesn't have a Democrat challenger. So she is now actually an Oklahoma State representative. Way to go, Molly Jenkins.
Yeah.
So there were, and our friend Jim Shaw over in my next door, Lincoln County, he actually beat Wallace, beat him at the poll, just not far enough. Unfortunately, didn't get a 50 plus. But so he'll be in a runoff, but we need to help Jim Shaw because this is a powerful guy that's been in the legislature for 8 years and it, has one more term to serve, and booting him out would be, I don't think people understand how important it is to unseat bad incumbents. There were some good incumbents that won. Jay Stegall won. Denise Crosswhite Hayter won. I think there were a number of really good incumbents that kept their seats, and that's great. We need to work with those incumbents, but for bad incumbents, we need to get them out. And I was laughing because I saw a video of a town hall that was done with, why can't the guy that Jim Shaw's running against? I don't know why I've had a mental block against him. Wallace talking at this meeting and basically talking about the 5th and 13th Amendments, and he didn't know what they were. There were people in the background going,
maybe he was just pleading the 5th and acting like he didn't know what was going on.
It's like, oh my goodness. So anyway, let's see, did I cover everything? So it was a great night for elections. We're super happy about that. Oh, I will say this. I honestly do, because everybody knows I've gotten cynical and crusty and I'm getting a really crappy attitude. And I will say, I had a meeting last night with several brave women, and go girls, several brave women who are coming against some stuff that's going on in their town. And I'm not going to go into it right now, because I do hope we have them on the show and can talk about some of the things that are going on. But I just feel more encouraged today than I have in a really long time. Yeah. I really honestly do. I just feel, like Jesus is in there. He's going to bat for us on some of this stuff.
Well, we need that local.
Better hitter than Jesus. He goes for the fences every time.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's where we've got to turn this thing around, is at the local, the very lowest levels of the local. I mean, that's where we got to start this deal.
Yeah.
And we've talked about it for a long time. No one's coming to save us in this deal. There is no single savior. Nope. Politics and all this stuff has become like religion to a lot of people. But, I think, just like you're so happy, we own our happiness. That's who controls how happy we are. It's us, not all this bad news and all this stuff, all these bad guys. So I'm happy this is happening.
Yeah, I just feel encouraged. And let me say this. Once brave people stand up and speak out,
yeah,
other brave people will speak up and stand out. So I'm going to make an announcement today. Can you hear my drum roll?
Yeah.
I am suing the Oklahoma State Election Board for what happened to me and being fired. And the lawsuit either was live yesterday or today. It will be live. It will be filed. And I'm simply, and I forgot to turn off my ringer. So good morning, everybody. And I absolutely will just fight this, as far as I can possibly fight it. And I just want to encourage other people, and more information will go out about this in the newsletter on Monday, because I am setting up a Give, Send, Go. If you want to, help defray expenses, that would be great. But if we don't really push back, if we don't really actively start pushing back as hard as we can, they'll just roll over us. It'll be like Tiananmen Square. And that's where we are right now. And if we don't stand up to the tanks, then we're going to lose. But if I keep going, we're not going to have the time to bring in our wonderful guest for this morning.
Yeah.
So shall we bring on Mary with V1SUT?
Definitely. Especially with everything she's been pumping out lately.
Good morning, Mary with V1SUT.
Good morning. How are the two of you? Okay. Right. I laughed out loud about how can I plead the 5th if I don't know the 5th? It's like when Bart Simpson said, how the hell can I talk about hell if I can't say hell? It is. There are those moments when those who seek to lead us show us how much they don't know. And last night was really good. I'd love to hear when the people speak. And I'm going to tell you that Secchieri-Garvin race, I personally collected every single mailer in that race because I wanted to look afterward and see if people were still falling for what's on the postcard. And we know a lot about who's behind the postcards. And they didn't. There was a flood of things coming out from the, just the bullet point claims of I stand for this and that and that. I think the people, at least down there in the Tri-City area, are looking for how they vote now, which is encouraging. It's don't talk to me. I want to know how you vote.
Yeah.
When you're in the chamber.
Yeah.
So that was really encouraging.
I think so too. So if that dark money thing, even though we didn't get any legislation for it, if it opened the eyes of, people, then it's a good thing. And that's all we need are good things. So,
Absolutely.
but you've been opening the eyes of people for months and months and months about what's going on in public schools. So what do you have for us today?
Well, you all know that we started this harmful coaching series. Anyone who watches the news in Oklahoma knows that sexual abuse within Oklahoma public education has become an epidemic. And that's just what we see, the people that are caught, the people that are arrested. And we really started to dig into, I was connected with a very brave and smart young woman named Ashley Rolen. And she had been trying for some years to get anyone to listen about abuse that she suffered at the hands of a coach at her high school some 22 years ago now. And she's going to be here with us to tell her own story. I don't want to say that, but I will tell you, as the outlet trying to give a voice to people who should be heard, that strangely, no one will allow them to be heard. We started on this journey in February. We published the first article, which was really Ashley's own personal story of abuse and how people assume that it's not reported at the time. If someone's still bringing it up this many years later, it was reported to the school at the time. So that first part of it happened in February. Well, they all started jumping off the ship, and we really got pummeled with legal letters, cease and desist letters, from people that we didn't even know were involved in this yet, which I found really ironic.
Isn't it weird how people that haven't really done anything protest so much that they haven't done anything that they get attorneys to protest? Isn't that funny how that works?
It is interesting. And, as a journalist, I want to go with what's factual.
Right.
In this situation, it is quite possible that you were a coach within this school district that Ashley and her classmates attended. And you knew that there were bad things going on, and you knew that administration wasn't handling it. And now, 20 some years later, you don't want your name associated with it. So that part, I do understand. But these men didn't even want their picture in a team picture from a yearbook back in 2000 within an article, with 40 other people in it. So it really piqued something in us. And we did. We had to stop, back up, pick through. I am very thankful that Oklahoma has a fantastic anti-SLAPP law. And so I always keep the most expensive attorney that I can possibly know in my pocket, because in the end, if anyone tries to silence you, they're going to be paying your legal bills in Oklahoma. And that law has been tested, and so far stands very, very strong for outlets who can prove that they're telling the truth, and people through those outlets like Ashley Rolen and her classmates who are telling the truth. So we sort of took some time, backed up, did the legal wrangling, came back with our second part of the series in May, which moved into, I started to really understand, we're not just talking about one little district. This was Little Axe Public Schools back in the late 90s and early 2000s. We were actually exploring how these perpetrators within schools, all the methods that they use and the psychological tactics that they use to sexually exploit both girls and boys. And this was the story in part 2 of how a 15-year-old girl was coerced and into a relationship that was very emotionally manipulative. There was one of her classmates had just passed away. And that event that was so tragic for these girls of that age was sort of used to create this strange bond that moved into a six months of sexual abuse. And to hear her talk about how she battled through that and tried to come out the other end and was still contacted by him after she was out of school. She left the school she'd been at her entire life after junior year without telling anyone, begged to get out of that school without even telling her parents what had happened, and still could not get away from his contact.
Oh my goodness.
So we looked at that, and that moved into part 3, which just published yesterday. And it's about how the abuse and the targeting of these girls actually intensified as they were graduating. It wasn't bad enough that they couldn't go to high school without being targeted for this. They were targeted after high school. And it's about a rented house in Norman nearby that these coaches shared, and some abuse that's reported from that home. Yes. So that's where we are today. But honestly, this has become not about Little Acts. It's showing how many people did speak up and go to the school, and they made assumptions that things were being handled. And in every single case now, there is no documentation. There is nothing that you can get an open records request on. We talked to staff members at the time, one in particular who worked in the office, and said, we asked, was there ever anything put in the personnel files of any of these people? And she said there would have to be something to put in. They literally just let them step down, or they let them get to the end of the year and didn't renew their contract. So it's about how this abuse has become a culture and how it's actually been spread and proliferated across our state. And so Ashley Rolen, from just trying to get the man that she reports perpetrated on her taken out of public schools, get his teaching credentials taken away so he can't hurt anyone else, she's really become an advocate for all other victims in the state and kids that this is going on right now and no one knows. So I'm just really excited to have her come tell her story, and really about what a fight it's been to be heard.
Well, let's bring her on then.
Okay.
And so welcome, Ashley Roland. Let's give her a round of applause. It's so nice of you to be on today and to tell us your story. We're so excited to hear from you. So I'm just going to turn it over and let you go, girl.
Hey, so I mean, the whole reason that I'm here, it started 4 years ago in 2020. I decided to.
We're having some connection issues, Ashley.
Oh,
there you go. Now we can hear you.
There you go.
Your mic is cutting in and out, so
you might be closer. There you go.
Okay. Tell me if that's a problem again. Sorry, I'm not very tech savvy.
That's okay. Neither are we. Everybody knows that.
Okay. So essentially what happened was in 2020, and I'll just be real honest with you and candid. I was actually watching the documentary about Larry Nassar, and I had literally gotten into it. That is the documentary over the USA gymnastics Olympic. And honestly, all of those years, I always thought that I was the only one. I wanted to hope, I think, that I was the only one that had been abused. And I got 5 minutes into that documentary, and when I heard that over 100 girls came forward, I was in the fetal position on the floor, and I literally felt God say, Ashley, now. So I contacted the Oklahoma State Department of Education and did an open records request to see when was his license taken. And I was blown away to find out that the year that my mother had reported my abuse in 2002, that nothing had been done. I can recap my abuse. I was not pursued or groomed. I never thought my teacher was looking at me in any way, let alone wanted to have sex with me. I went on my spring break trip with a group of friends, and I turn around at an outdoor concert club that we were at. We were actually at Club Schlitterbahn down in Texas.
Oh, yeah.
And we were at a concert, and I turn around, and there was Michael Allen and Sean Finch and someone, another teacher that they had accompanying them. And they wanted us to come back to their hotel room so bad. And I am going to be completely honest with you. At that time, I didn't want to go back to their hotel room because I didn't want to get them in trouble. Not at all because I thought they would do anything to us, but I didn't want to get them in trouble. I was smart enough to know that they shouldn't be hanging out with us. They can't do that. They'll get in trouble for that. I don't want to get them in trouble. And so they followed us to our next location, and it was Sean Finch was very persistent, wanted us to come, and talked to my girlfriend that I was down there with to going, and I was not going to let my friend go by herself.
Yeah.
And so I went. They paid for us to get into their hotel room. They immediately began to feed us alcohol. And tell us things, began telling us about how they were having sex with students, began telling us, what now as a mother, I can tell you was trying to get me to say, oh, okay, I'll do that too, or oh, okay. And, but that's not what happened. And so, after being completely inebriated and intoxicated, and I do believe personally, and as well as after being to doctors, that I was drugged. Surely, I was obviously drugged with alcohol, but I believe there was something more in my drinks.
Right.
I remember sitting out on the balcony and thinking I had made it. I saw the sun coming up and thought, okay, everything's okay. And that's when then I remember Michael Allen coming to pick me up, and I was like a rag doll. And then he proceeded to rape me. I woke up with him on top of me. He asked me if I took birth control. I didn't even have the ability to answer or use any bodily functions to do anything. I'd never removed my clothes. I never gave him any permission to be touched or anything of that nature. I'd never kissed the man. There was nothing of that nature.
Me.
So he told us not to tell anybody. I could go on. There's more to the story, but it's really irrelevant. But so I had to go back to high school, and he was there. That was my senior year, my junior senior year. Just to kind of let you know the student I was 17 years old. I had just turned 17 that February. This was in March that I had been raped. But I was also graduating a year early. I was at the top of my class. I was a star student, a star athlete. I was in NHS. I was, this was not on my repertoire of things to happen to me my senior year. So I told my mother. My mother my mother worked at the school, so it was very hard for her to take in. And so she went and told our superintendent and told our principal, and she thought that things were being done with such. Michael Allen left the school. So now to fast forward, then 2020, like I said, I watched this documentary. I'm on in the fetal position. And so I start reaching out, and I found out that Michael Allen was allowed to leave Little Axe, and he was allowed to go on to another school. And then there at that school, he ended up impregnating a student that he went on to marry. And so then that's what I needed to hear to know there's so much more involved. So I contacted the OSDE, the Oklahoma State Department of Education at that point, told them my story, gave them my statement, went through all the things that they said. I contacted Texas. I started a police report. I did all the things. And then they let me know that there was no investigator. At this time, this was Joy Hoffmeister's administration, that they had no investigator to take on any of these claims, and asked me if I would start to collect statements and if I would start to do my own investigation. So I did. So literally I'd pray about it. I'm gonna be real honestly, I'd pray about it. God, who do I need to reach out to? And I would contact that person, always very scary, and contact that person and share my story. And I didn't contact one person that didn't have a story of their own, whether it was my abuser or another coach. Every female that I have contacted on my own has had a story of her own. So finally, after doing that for years, and collecting and sending to the Oklahoma State Department of Education, I finally had to tell myself enough is enough. How long am I? I started with my story. Now I carry all these survivors' stories. So I finally decided, and a year ago, I had seen a video of Ryan Walters once he got voted in, and I saw that he had said that he was going to go after not just the pedophile, but those who kept him in office. And I thought, okay, this is my stopping then. That's why I'm doing this now. So I then certified, mailed, and sent in my investigation, timelines, statements, all these things. And it's been at the Oklahoma State Department of Education for a year now. I sent it June of 2023. I've had an investigator on my case for a max of 5 months, and that was after the article came out in February. And he was fired after asking for the temporary suspension of these men's licenses. So this has turned out to be something much bigger than me. And I need people to understand that the only reason I'm being so vulnerable and exposing myself and my family and opening us up to this is because enough is enough, and something has to change. This is very clear that there is not a process in place that's truly protecting our children. And to put our survivors, people that we know were children, to this level of, I mean, it just grosses me out. And then I have to remind myself, I look at our society right now and we see it in the entertainment realm, and people are eating it up. You know, they're eating their popcorn and watching these Netflix documentaries over Nickelodeon and Epstein and Harvey Weinstein, you know, and Bill Cosby. It's happening in our state. It's happening where we're sending our schools every day. It is nothing short, in my opinion, of human trafficking, when we know that there are pedophiles in our school system that are preying on our children. Our children should be able to go to school in peace and not have to worry. They have enough on their plates. They have to worry about bullying and kids and what's going on. They shouldn't have to worry about their teacher. And I've been really appalled in this journey of the things I've heard. And I've even heard people say, well, it was kind of accepted back then. When was pedophilia accepted back then? Why are we looking at teachers doing this to their students like that's something acceptable? Because it's not.
Wait, I'm having a moment. I can't get past.
No, please.
People honestly did not say those words to you.
I have had to realize, I was telling Mary before we got on here, that I'm kind of processing today that I am destroying some people's perception of what their high school experience was. And I hate that, but I have to be honest, you know, and yes, it is. I have been blown away at how many people, I've been blown away at how many people knew or heard about things, and how many people didn't do anything, or how many teachers knew. I had recorded a conversation with one man. It was released in Article 1, and he's one of the ones that sent a cease and desist, so I won't say his name, but he was told 2 weeks. He was administrator and was told 2 weeks after I was raped that Michael Allen, you know, from Michael Allen's mouth, you know, I'm sure he didn't use the word raped. Who knows what disgusting term that he used. But this was something that, I mean, these are mandatory reporters. It should not take me, a survivor, having to say, this is not okay. This should not continue. And it's really disgusting for me to tell you that, you know, since I started this part of the journey in 2020, after, you know, having gone forward back when the abuse occurred, I and myself, my husband and I we have followed Michael Allen. I've had to make it my responsibility to follow Michael Allen around. And in the last 4 years, this man has jumped to 5 different school districts, and he has been fired. I called the first one, and they brought him in, and he quit on the spot. They let him go to another school. I called that one. They let him quit on the spot, and they let him go to another school. Then he went and hid at his mother-in-law's school. So I didn't call there because I already knew she knew who he was. He married her daughter. So, you know, and then he went back to a school that I called, and that's the school he's been at, Sentinel. And then it wasn't until this last article and everything came out that then all of a sudden his position was up. So now I don't even know where he's at. I don't even know where he's at now. I'm sure he's going to be lurking around some unknowing school district, or he's going to lay low until he thinks I've disappeared again. But this is so ridiculous. This is ridiculous.
It's pretty hard to do this to me, as everybody on here can attest to, but I'm just speechless. I mean, how is it that so many people will give lip service to, you know, we have to protect our children, we have to protect our, you know, women, but then again, I don't even know that we care about women anymore, because we have the trans activists and the, you know,
I will tell you that is kind of a thing within our household. I try to, you know, let my family keep me in check, and that's what I tell them is, I feel like I'm in a weird movie. Like, how do so many people know about this abuse and nothing's happening? And I've been taught that means people don't care. That's what that receives to me, is because nobody cares, and I'm not okay with that. I'm not.
Well,
okay
let's
with
back
that.
up. Nobody in a position to do anything about it cares, because obviously there are lots of us out here who care. And I mean, I'm giving you a virtual hug as we speak. I mean, it's horrifying.
Yeah.
But
I just need people to know that I'm not sharing my story. These other survivors did not come forward for me to share their stories, so that way people can have a salacious read and talk
right,
about it and it be done. Like, change needs to happen. First and
right.
foremost, all of these men need their licenses taken. In my opinion, many of these school districts need to be checked, because so many of the people that were at Little Axe are still at Little Axe. And I hate to burst that bubble. I'm so grateful for so many of the relationships and experiences that I had there that were positive. But there are people that are there that I know 100% know about my abuse and about these other abuses. So there needs to be a disruption of things. And it's to that place now where I'm pretty confident in thinking, if you have been involved in leadership for longer than 5 years in these school districts, you're part of the problem.
Yeah.
You
So
know,
let me ask you this. So let's drill down to some specific stuff. How do you feel like, having gone through everything that you've gone through, what is the number one thing you think needs to happen for this problem to be solved? I mean, have you sat about really thinking about that and like putting a list together of, we need to have legislators do this, or we need to have people? I mean, do you have a list that you think, after going through this as a victim, that you feel like everybody needs to know?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Give it to us.
Well, I truly believe that Oklahoma needs to know that there is not a process in place. I mean, just like we just saw in Edmond, there's too much gray area of what a school district is allowed to do on their own, and then where the place of the Oklahoma State Department of Education comes in. There needs to be a strict policy and procedure in place of how we handle sexual abuse, whether that is current or past. We need to come together as a people and decide that we're not going to let our school system be riddled up with pedophiles. And I understand all these other things that are going on, but I kind of feel like Satan's using it to keep us all from seeing what's really going on. I mean, pedophiles are in our school district on a daily basis, and they know they're safe. That's the thing I've come to understand. I've come to realize as a survivor in this, that school districts are more afraid of a survivor coming forward and exposing that they didn't do the right thing than they are afraid of pedophiles that they are keeping in the school district.
Yeah,
These school districts know that they are keeping pedophiles. When you have these reports coming to you, when you have text messages and emails, and you've got video surveillance, they know what's going on. But because there's no procedure in place, nobody's holding anybody accountable. They don't want to have a scandal on their hands. They just let them go to another school district. Like, those kids at that school district don't matter. And that's disgusting. That's appalling. To me, that's doing the opposite of what you take an oath as a teacher or an educator to do. There has to be legislation involved. You really probably don't want to know all of my opinion. But I think that the OSDE completely needs to be shaken up. I disagree with it being an elected position. I don't think our school system should be placed in a political stance. I think that our kids are really being the ones that are missing out, because if I want to run for politics in the state of Oklahoma, I should become state superintendent, because that's the next stepping spot for me to become. It shouldn't be that. We need to have somebody that wants to have that job, because that's the job they've been after. They care about our kids. That's their lifetime dream job, not because it's a stepping stone to further political aspirations. And I'm not putting anything against that. We need good people in our in politics, right? We need people fighting for, but it just shouldn't be intertwined, I don't believe, within the school system, because I feel like that's why the ball's getting dropped. The last thing I ever thought was that my abuser and all of this would become kind of political. It shouldn't be.
Well,
how is law enforcement getting kind of circumvented in this deal? I mean, why can't they step in and start doing something?
That's a fantastic question.
Yeah, I mean,
good question.
For me, I've had a lot of issue because mine happened out of state. Then we could talk about the stat. You asked about my list. One of the very first and foremost thing is the statute of limitations is absurd. Most people do not understand that in 2016, when they changed it to 45, which I want everyone to know, I'm 39 now. When I started all this, I was 35. But I did go forward at 17. They changed it to 45, but they didn't make it retroactive. So it makes absolutely no bearing prior to 2016. So
Oh,
so
okay.
if that answers your question, I mean, literally all of these laws are put in place to protect the pedophile, to protect the predator. I'm the one that has to worry about being sued. I'm the one that has to worry about all of these things. And I gain nothing. The only thing I get out of sharing my story and doing such is first and foremost to get these men out of they do not deserve to have a teaching license. They should be registered pedophiles, but that's the next step, right?
Yeah.
But there needs to be different policies in place. There needs to be a strict policy. It needs to be, we need to treat our kids like they matter more. I mattered more. The kids after me mattered more. And then doing my investigation, to find out that there were things about him that came forward before I was raped. These people lost the opportunity to protect me from having to, and I'm grateful for how God has used this in my life. But do you really think that this is what I wanted to make my life mission? No. Will I let God do that and use me and take something that was meant to harm me and help others? Absolutely. But I need people to understand this is God's doing something crazy in me, because most people can't do this. I feel like I can't do this most days. So something has to change.
Well, I wanted to point out something, and Mary, I hope you'll chime in on this with me, because we've talked about this numerous times.
Yes.
There are some things at play here that I don't think people understand. And that's the thing that we've really, I think, got to push out further than that. There is and I'm going to make people mad, but it wouldn't be the first time. There is a protectionism in police, particularly.
Yes.
There's a protectionism in the among the DAs, for example. There's another one where there's a protectionism among school employees.
Yes.
And I'm not sure, I think it's it's like a two-pronged thing. One of it is a camaraderie thing. Hey, I'm going to stick up for you because you're my colleague, right? And then I think the other thing is, the other two-pronged thing, part of it is, people don't have any gumption anymore. They have no guts. They have no, whatever you want to call it. I could be crude and crass, but I will not for a change. They don't have any gumption. And so when this kind of happens and you're in a protectionism racket, which is so many of these things, and you go, excuse me, there's a problem here, then they go immediately after you. I was in the public schools for years and years. I know how the protectionism racket works and what happens when you step out of the protectionism circle, to do something different. They come after you like, I don't know, ravens on a dead possum. I mean, it's just absolutely unbelievable. So and unfortunately, that can't be legislated. I mean, you can't legislate people to not do these kinds of things, but you're trying to break through something that when you've got a protected group and you have the one person trying to step out of the protected group to do anything, or the two or even three people, they'll just devour them.
Yes.
How do you make that better?
Well, let me just give a couple quick observations.
Please.
From having been privileged to know Ashley's story. And I need you to understand there's about a dozen statements from other women that went in that certified letter to the OSDE from Ashley. So this is not just one person's fight against an abuser. This is a bunch of women fighting against the system. But one thing that I did notice in talking to multiple people who worked at the district at the time, and all of these classmates of Ashley's that were either victims or witnesses, that employees of the school district, their children were actually particularly targeted.
No.
Yes. And which is amazing. Sincerely. There are multiple cases of, and they're much less likely to talk about it. And this is what I found out. And Ashley, I'm going to talk about your precious mom. Ashley lost her mom a couple of years ago, but her
Sorry,
mom
Ashley,
worked
me too.
for many, many years in that school system. She actually was one of the people when Ashley's abuser, before this happened to Ashley, was accused by other people of the same actions, and the families came forward, and her mother specifically made notes about how she helped fax some things to an attorney, and everyone defended him. She sincerely believed he could never do that, because what people don't understand about grooming within schools, just like pedophiles groom a family to have access to the children, within a school system or any other organization, they groom everyone they work with to be the most trusted person in the building. And that happened over and over and over again. And I have people contacting me who are saying, I left working at the district because this happened to my child, but they won't speak up. So you need to understand that until it happens to your child and that bubble of trust and camaraderie, because they've been so thoroughly groomed by the perpetrator, is bursted, they have no idea. You talked a little bit about, you almost got into policy. And what I've found from talking to these people is that the laws here, Ashley's absolutely right. The laws here are all in place. Everyone's a mandated reporter.
Right.
There is an inherent legislated step that everyone must take, and they've overridden that with policy. Yes. And whether it's written policy or it's just cultural policy within school districts, when you hear something, you take it to administration and it funnels up the chain. That in itself is illegal. Everyone who knows about abuse or neglect of a child is personally responsible under the law to report. But the policy is hush, hush, hush. This must end up in the superintendent's hand. And a brave woman who worked for many years in the office told me that the policy was let them step down. There was never an investigation. And they described the people who did this. This is the thing. We would imagine that someone that would have so little care for the children in the next district where the staff member went to work would be horrible people. That's not how they're described. In the next sentence, they'll say, but he was a really great superintendent. He was a really great principal. He was so nice to everyone. He helped me with this, that, or the other. So these things are happening in one box. It means that they honestly believe and have been somehow trained that that's what they're supposed to do. So that in itself needs to change. And we understand that school boards and school administrators are trained by these nonprofit entities.
I'll just say it, OSSBA.
Right, and COSA. They're trained and they have been for generations. So now this has become a societal norm within the public education system, and it's generations long. This is how you're supposed to handle it. And I will go further and say that they've been instructed that you don't go past that. Now you're getting into the privacy of an employee. You don't, once that person decides to step down, just as Ashley described, her reported abuser, we saw this over and over. They would get called into the office, say, we have a report this happened when you were at Little Axe, and they would go, don't even need a name. Bye, I resign. They know. And then the school district somehow believes that that's where their responsibility ends. So I believe that has to change. The other two quick points, police. So that same person that I talked to that worked in the office, I asked about school resource officers. This person knew the two school resource officers that they had 20 some years ago by name, knew which law enforcement agencies they had come from, knew about their families. They were staff. And when I asked about them and said, were they involved in any of these investigations? They were like, well, yeah, they knew. So even staff members assume that if a school resource officer is involved, that means something is going to happen to pursue the criminal nature of these acts.
Wait, stop just 1 second. Because I want to sit on that. That is beyond disturbing.
Yes.
So there was a school resource officer, Ashley, in Little Axe when you were there.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
And that,
Okay,
that
so a
is,
school resource officer is a direct employee of the police department in the town that's providing the resource officer.
Hang
we
on.
didn't have a police department out in Little Axe.
Right.
So I don't know the details of that, but yes, that's part of why my mother believed the police were involved. We thought there was a
For
police
Pete's
report.
sakes.
Yes, this is very common, and I just want to make a quick correction. No, the police officers work for the district
Yes.
while they're a resource officer.
Oh, I forgot. That's right. They have a
paid by the
contract.
district.
We had our school
Mhm.
resource officer was a Luther woman in this case, but then
Yes.
we signed a contract with Luther Public Schools for her to be the resource officer. And you're right. So
Exactly. So I want to
Oh,
present
wow.
something to you. They
Never even
answer
put that
to the
together.
administrator of the school. They are directed in their duties by the administrator of the school, and they are hired and they answer to the school board,
Holy
not law
cow.
enforcement. So I want to present one quick thing to you. The case of Dagny Benedict up in Owasso,
Yeah.
who it was supposedly bullied, and now we know very much so no, supposedly died as a result of injuries in a bathroom because of something having to do with the trans. And we now know from the entire police investigation that's not true. Tragically, Dagny committed suicide. But the last that we know of video of that precious child is body cam from a school resource officer who went to visit her when she was being checked out in the emergency room. I question whether we would ever have seen that video or if anything criminal would have happened in this case if that precious child had woken up the next morning. He was working for the school system when he went to see her. He was not working in his official law enforcement capacity. And he actually, and I'm not going to say he talked out of, but he very much was explaining the rights to file charges to her and her grandmother in a way that discouraged it because the other side would then also file charges. So there were no reports on either side filed. We think that officer was there in the capacity of something criminal had happened, but he was a school resource officer. We only know about it because she tragically died.
Yes.
So the school resource officer in Little Axe, there was never a police report related to any of these things that these women reported at the time. Not one. The other thing is DAs that you bring up, and that's a whole nother subject. We do
we'll have to have a whole.
Yes, we do see a lot of resistance to filing charges in some pretty obvious cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It seems to me then that one of the things that we absolutely have to figure out a way to do is to make resource officers actual policemen and women. I don't know.
Or is it from the state level, from the local level? Yeah. Should there be requirements that if you are working in the capacity in an Oklahoma public school as a school resource officer, that you're not just required to lock doors and check parking lots, that if something of a criminal nature happens, you must report and pursue, or perhaps it needs to move outside of a school employee, that officer should never respond to a criminal act within the school system while he's employed by the school system, he or she.
Well, I guess I'm kind of stuck on that one because we have a mandatory reporting law.
Yes.
Somehow,
so here's where
the culture has to change. I think that's really what it comes down to. I mean, it's kind of like we're, as I've been glad to see that so much of society is healing. It's kind of like that family that has all these abusers in it and nobody talks about it. They know they're there, but they think they're doing something to protect the family. That shouldn't be what our school districts are. And unfortunately, that's what it is. It's these cultures of they think they're this tight-knit family. And unfortunately, our kids are the ones that are suffering, and it shouldn't be that way. It's your job, and you go to your job, and you are supposed to do right by those children. And if sometimes that means that a coworker. And that's what that culture has to change. It's your coworker. You have a right and a responsibility to those children to turn in your coworker.
Yep.
And then if you see that your supervisor is not doing anything, then you turn in your supervisor. People have to stop being afraid of losing their jobs. People have to stop being afraid of speaking out, because that is going to be, we can change policy all day long. But as we all know, if you want to get away with something, you're going to get away with it. And as long as these school districts treat each other as though that the camaraderie is more important, the loyalty to each other is more important. Keeping a name of a school district, I don't even understand that. Our kids are suffering. Children do not deserve to go into their adulthood having to heal from trauma induced by their teacher, who was put in a place to protect them, guide them, teach them. That's the least stories I've heard. I haven't heard of any teaching or anything impactful. All of these women have had to go into their life. Some women never even had told their husbands till I reached out to them. I mean, this is stuff that innately destroys who somebody should have been. And until we start to look at sexual abuse like that you're literally killing the very person that person would have been, then we're not going to change. But it's deep. I've come to understand, unfortunately, in this journey, this is very deep. As a culture, we have to do something. It's almost like it's almost like little science experiments with these articles. I can share an article link and it's crickets, but my phone's blowing up and everybody's reading it, but nobody's sharing it, or, or da-da-da. Like, we all have to play an active role, and I'm going to do everything I can in my role, but I need people's help.
Well, I do have a question, and Michael, it goes back to what you said. If we have these mandatory reporting laws and the school is playing protectionism game and they're not actually reporting, how is it that these people don't get arrested or charged or whatever you want to call it for not following the law?
Well,
can anyone explain that to me?
I can. So what I see is, on the mandatory reporting, I think that we've been bluffed to believe that if an officer is on campus or was involved when parents came in to talk to an administrator about this, that was a mandatory report, but it's not. So that's how they're getting away with that. And also, everything here, as you dig and dig and dig into this, is funneling information to ensure that these things are self-investigated by the schools.
Yeah.
So there's an illusion that an investigation occurred. Oftentimes it's under Title IX, which is absurd.
Yeah.
We're not discriminating against a child. We're doing exactly what Ashley just described to a child.
Right.
And then I see it even now, as the policy and laws shift, the schools start to shift to continue this really destructive pattern. If you look at Senate Bill 3958, which just passed, and it has to do with the sexting and the digital communications we see between teacher, coach.
Sherry Conley's bill.
Yes, Sherry Conley's bill that she and Shane Jett put together. And that bill passed. And the bill says, if you are going to communicate digitally with this child, text, email, whatever it may be, whatever platform, then a parent needs to be involved. I am already seeing districts with a history of covering this kind of behavior setting up internalized systems so that how we're going to adhere to this Bill 3958 is we're going to be monitoring. And if you communicate with a child, it all has to happen within our internal system. So now, once again, the spirit of the law and the purpose was to include the parent.
Yep.
And now the parents won't have access to that.
Mm-hmm.
So with every move, there's a checkmate.
Well, it's deliberate.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, it is.
So
it's disturbing.
I mean, I hate to say this, but it goes back to, parents,
It does.
Because you're the only person who has ultimate control over that child until they're 18 years old. And I think my biggest frustration is so many parents think that school is the way it was when they were. Oh, true, Jana. I mean, that's why Jana and I advocate for homeschool constantly, right, Jana?
I homeschool.
Yes.
I homeschool. Yeah.
Good for you, Ashley.
Yeah.
I really do believe that parents, they lie to themselves all the time, and it's human nature. So I'm not going to say I haven't done it or wouldn't do it, or I'm not saying it's human nature. Well, I really don't feel like I can deal with that right now, so it's probably okay, right? Oh, and Jana also makes a good point too, because I don't want to put it up like homeschooling. We're so perfect as homeschoolers, not just dropping them off at co-ops either, because as homeschoolers, Jana and I have both had that problem of parents who they don't want their kids in the public school because they know nonsense is going on, but they still don't want to parent them. So they find a co-op and then dump the kid at the co-op and then take off. And so the kid's still not parented. So it's where our problem is parents. I mean, and I hate to say that because I'm not taking it away. I'm not taking away what's happened to you and these horrible people who are perpetrating this horribleness on children. They should be, I don't even want to talk about what should happen to them. But I do believe that if parents would stop everything and pay attention to their children 24/7, I think things would be different, but we don't do that in this society. In this society, we're more interested in having two parents working and buying those things and getting the extra things. And we do those things. And so many people, and I'm not talking about the people who don't have the wherewithal to do any better. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the people who do have that opportunity and parent your kids.
There are people who I think we all want our kids to have and meet somebody that will impact them positively. Sure. And there are good teachers. There are good coaches, not to take away from that.
Yeah, you're right.
But it's recognizing that the grooming that can take place in those close relationships, that parents have to pay more attention to that. I hear all the time, my teacher's coach wouldn't, or my student's coach wouldn't do that, or so-and-so, I can't see so-and-so doing that. I, even after Article 3 went out yesterday, had someone reach out to me, and she was telling me a story she remembered from high school and said, but Ashley, I remember hearing the coaches talking about how they cared about you. We have to all start to realize that some of these people don't need to have so much care for our kids. Exactly. It's wonderful to have these people come around, but we can't just leave our kids in their care. We can't just leave our kids to them. We can't let them come in. I mean, that's what the grooming we're seeing takes place, and Mary can speak to that. Is it's using, like she said, another student's death. It's using your parents going through a divorce. It's using all of this information because they're around your kids for 7.5+ hours a day, going then to sporting events and all these things. And they get to know your kids so well that they become so vulnerable. And there's no way a child can be protected from that whenever we allow them to continue to just seethe inside of the school districts.
That's such a great observation, because in Little Acts with her classmates that I've talked to, they will talk about how one coach did this to them, one or the other, but then they'll also say, you have to understand, Little Acts was a wonderful place. Like, the teachers really cared about us. They asked about our lives. They knew what we were doing on the weekends. They were really cool. It was more of this shift from the professional teacher that we didn't know their first name to this teacher who cared about what happened to me inside and outside the classroom, which turns out, when professionalism drops and we break that barrier and suddenly teachers are trying to be still in high school and friends with kids, there's a lot more of this activity going on. So I did see a lot of that.
And I want to point this out to young adults who will listen or are listening. I remember when, so this was a long time ago, right? I remember when I was in high school and we had a really cool drama teacher, right? And so there were a bunch of us that in the evenings or on the weekends would go over there and smoke and drink at her house, and we were all under 18, and so, but she was cool, and we all loved her because she was cool. And really, honestly, I mean, what you're saying, Mary, is 1,000%. What happened to the professionalism? Parents and children should all be expecting this level of professionalism.
Yes.
Teachers should not be parenting children. And I will say, as a teacher, I actually fell into that myself, because when I was teaching middle school, there were so many unparented kids.
Yes, it's easy to do. And teachers go into teaching because they have a very compassionate heart and a heart for children, and particularly struggling children. So crossing those lines happens pretty quickly. And then maternal or paternal instincts kick in for a teacher, and they have sort of this emotional ownership of kids. So that's pretty common throughout the school. Now, anywhere children gather and good people who want to serve children gather, also will people who want to exploit children. And they fit into that environment so perfectly. And the behavior, from what I was able to find out and researching the professional tracks of these men as they hop from district to district, is that the behavior doesn't stop. The man gets older, but he's still pursuing a 15-year-old girl.
Yes.
And if people think this is something that maybe they did when they were in their 20s and they got caught up in a culture of party, because there was a lot of drinking to this culture among the coaches. We cite in the articles multiple DUIs during that time, different things that were happening that show that what the girls are saying about this heavy drinking, heavy partying culture was true. But the behavior just didn't stop. And you need to understand that if it's not taken care of, the first time someone like Ashley's mother says this happened, it will continue to happen. The other thing is, Jenny, you touched on when you're talking about it has to be parents. It comes back to, even for those who they have to be a double income family or homeschooling is not possible for them. This is a local control problem. And Ashley and I were just speaking about this before the podcast. We are a local control state, and everyone's sort of looking. So, well, and that's where we've gotten. Everyone's looking to the state agency or the state official to fix this problem. And honestly, it's lent to someone trying to fix this problem and having to get pedophiles out of schools, having to now go get legislation written to change their rules, which was not required of any previous administration in that building. It's become very, very political. Yes. If you look at the recent decision in Edmond, where a higher court overrode the state superintendent, and Edmond Schools is saying, no, we can have very sexualized books in our libraries and our classrooms, and you can't do a darn thing about it. You have to understand that the State Department of Education has 2 legislative sticks, and those sticks have been whittled down, and they're not letting them get any bigger. We can go after, hit the accreditation of these districts, which is limited, and they have rules proposed out there trying to make that more stringent. If you don't report this to law enforcement administrators, we're going to ding your accreditation, which means we're going to ding funding eventually. And that's never been the case. And then teacher accreditation. Everyone needs to understand they can take away a teacher's certificate, but it is a full legal process, and the teacher can push back on this. So when you're looking at those 2 sticks, and none of the carrots have worked for the districts to really handle these sexual abuse cases properly, this is a local control issue. Parents must take back their school boards. Parents must stop going to a school with a repeated history of not handling these things well with their complaints. They need to go directly to outside law enforcement.
Well, I think those are all excellent points. And, Ashley, I can't even, we had a nice comment here from Jana too. Ashley doesn't seem like the typical student victim that they tell us to watch out for in safety programs.
I'm telling you, when these men read the article, I'm sure they probably said, oh, we went after the wrong one. Because and I'm grateful, and only few people will probably understand what I mean by this. I'm grateful that God chose me because somebody had to stand up and do something. And if I'm the one to do that, then I will. And I just want people to know there is truly, I get some of the sweetest comments and people say things, but it's in my weakness that God makes me strong. I promise I'll probably get off this podcast and go cry, you know? So like, just please know this is because I know it's bigger than me and something has to be done. Something has to happen.
And I want to give Ashley all the kudos. It is so inspiring to be able to tell the story of someone who is willing to, with absolutely no gain to self. And she and I both know through this journey, there have been a lot of bumps and attacks. And also all of the girls in her class that came forward with these written statements to the OSDE and continue to push for something to be done, not for themselves, but for the kids sitting in classrooms today.
Yes.
Well, actually, I'm about in tears because I think it's true. I mean, I think you're a wonderful example of the Christian model. I really honestly do believe that, because we're not told. I mean, we're not told that everything's going to be easy. Somehow that got mixed up in the messaging.
Yeah.
That's not the way it's supposed to be. So I applaud you for, your love of Jesus and allowing him to work, on you and in you and through you, and to allow him to give you that bravery and to go out to do what you're doing, because so many people say, well, I feel like I should be and then they're not doing it. So, you are to be commended on so many levels, Ashley. And I think one of the best things about you is, well, not just that the light of Jesus shines through you, and I can see that, young lady, but the other thing is, I do think that, again, like I pointed out, people tend to, it's been shown even in studies that have been done, once somebody steps out, then the people who were too afraid to step out in front will step out behind. So I do applaud you for doing this, and I applaud the other ladies for coming forward, and realize that nothing is going to get done until we have amassed an army, because this unfortunately is bigger than individuals, and we're going to have to amass a small army to go after these people. So thank you, Ashley, and God bless you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being a part of the army, because you are. So thank you.
Well, hang in there, Chicklet, and we will talk to you again. And if you need something, or you want to, always reach out to us, and I can put something in the newsletter if I need to, or something. So just make sure that you continue to reach out to us and allow us to help you as much as we can, because you're a very brave woman who deserves the support. Thank you. Well, thank you for giving me a platform, and thank you to Mary for giving us all a voice. So Absolutely. Thank you very much.
It's a privilege.
All right. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I'm interested to hear Michael's thoughts. I have seen his face throughout this, and so much of this falls in what he is so good at.
Well, the thing that bothers me is, this is just a total culture problem. I know, Jenny, you said, hey, we need to, as parents, we need to really pay attention, watch this. But overall, we've been just conditioned to trust these schools. Even Ashley herself said, she saw these guys and she didn't want them to get in trouble. She trusted them so much that she was trying to protect them. And as parents, I think parents do the same thing. It's so easy to look the other way, because if you as a parent had a child in that school and you were involved in any of that, anything with your kid, then that makes you responsible now for what's happening in that school. And people don't want to take that responsibility. That's really what it comes down to, because if you have a community that takes responsibility in their school district, guess what? None of that stuff's going to happen, because as soon as one thing happens, you have a community rallied around, and that person is in jail, literally. It's an accountability issue. It's a culture issue. We've got to change that. Like no matter what kind of legislation we have, you know, what's that going to change if people still trust how these schools are running? I think Mary just hit the nail on the head. Like always, you have all these internal investigations at these school districts. They do, and Jenny, you and I have seen it firsthand. I've seen it firsthand myself with investigations we've tried to do within schools. Everything is encapsulated so they don't have to let anything out, because there is so much money involved in these school districts. They can't afford to have a black mark on any record. And I think it's an absolute travesty that you have a coach or one of these pedophilic teachers or whoever, it's mostly coaches, because the coaches have emotional bonds with these kids that aren't in a regular classroom. So it's a lot easier to attach yourself to these girls and boys, you know, at that level, when you have so much trust and you have emotional bonds, you know, in sports. I mean, that's what part of sports. But the travesty of the whole deal is these guys can leave and go somewhere else and just keep going without any kind of consequence, any kind of anything. I mean, to let something like that happen is, and I think you had some firsthand knowledge of that also, Jenny, to where if someone resigns, you know, now it's not necessarily in their personnel file to go forward or, you know, whatever. I mean, it is so wrong, but, you know, I'm so proud of Ashley, because it is so hard to come out and be kind of that first, be the point of the spear. I mean, yes, that spear is strong, you know, as it gets bigger and longer and heavier and more powerful. But to be the first out there, that is incredibly tough. I have so much admiration for her. But if she doesn't come out, guess what? It gets worse. It continues. It keeps going. Now there's a chance. Now there's a real chance to really start affecting change kind of across the board in this whole deal. And we have to do it. We can't take the foot off the gas in any way. We have to, as people, no one's coming to save us. We say that all the time. No one's coming to save Ashley. She's got to do this to help save some other people, but no one's coming to just overall pass a law, save us all. It's not going to happen. We have to take that responsibility ourselves.
I completely agree. And I see on the media side of this, I see some other false policies out there where we can't let someone tell their story about something like this if that person hasn't been arrested.
Yeah.
And they're hiding behind that as though they can't possibly. That is not true. You can let someone tell their story, and you can tell their story accurately as they posed it without being in some jeopardy of losing a lawsuit over it. The media has also lost its bravery. And we live in a state where that anti-SLAPP law is a fantastic tool in the state to keep free speech. I don't know why it doesn't happen in these cases.
Well, let me say something, just because maybe it'll help give the opposite perspective here, or a different perspective. So I do remember when I was mayor. I mean, that's a thing. And when we had to let, you know, some people go. And I was absolutely aghast to find out that basically people are so afraid of being sued for wrongful employment that that's kind of a bottom line of what goes on here. Yes. They will say, well, we'll get sued for wrongful employment. Don't forget, there are teachers' unions involved here. And while I don't happen to be one of the teachers' unions, there's such a problem in Oklahoma. There's hardly a problem in Oklahoma compared to California or New York or other places like that. But one of the things, and one of the places where they are really heinous, is they protect. The teachers' unions will come in and bring their attorneys, do everything they can to protect these teachers from getting fired. And no administration wants to deal with that. You know, they just don't, because these administrators, I've heard of very few of them that I think probably have any gumption at all. All they're just trying to do is rake in their high six-figure salary, and move on down the road to the next school and I don't have a lot of respect, sadly, for administrators at this point in time. However, they don't, because they know that if they try to fire somebody, that there will be this big, backlash normally. They just won't make an issue out of firing. They'll just let them go. And so I do really believe, having experienced this even outside of the public schools, but still in a public forum, a taxpayer supported forum, that's what a lot of it is. They'll say, well, we're just afraid, that we're going to get sued. And that's how some of this ends up happening.
Yep. And I would say a couple of points. Sometimes a parent comes to a school and says, this is what's happening. I intercepted these texts, this kind of thing. And there are cases where the school board claims they never knew about it. And in some of those cases, I think it's true. I think it never makes it past the administrator.
Yeah.
But sometimes when it makes it to the school board, they go into executive session on these things.
Yeah.
And there's a lawyer that is coaching them with exactly the same scare tactic that you just verbalized. So I think that's happening, where the goal becomes to not get sued as a school, which I'm going to be honest, they have insurance for that. These things are going to happen. Kids have to come first. So I don't really understand how that happens. Oh, here's a comment. OSBI brings the state unions in to talk with new administration during training to explain how that process works. And it's surprising how systematic it is. Yes, that's so much of this is trained, where we have administrators thinking, great comment, thinking that they're doing the right thing. The other thing I would say is, when we look at accountability at the state level, I believe that there is a deep state within all of our state agencies, no matter if there's an elected official at the top. So if you look at the State Department of Education, the real mechanism by which that they go out and they see what's happening in the districts, and they are there for oversight of the districts, is RAOs, the Regional Accreditation Officers. And I think there's about 7 of them at the OSDE. And I think that they are, from what I've seen, mostly former superintendents. So yes, they are. So it is become so generational. It's a bit like Congress at this point, that we go into Tom Cole's office and smoke cigars and we bring the new guys into it.
Stop and repeat that again.
Okay. So
who are these regional accreditation officers?
So the state is split up into so many parts, and I think there are 7 regional accreditation officers who go out and meet on a regular basis with all the superintendents in the state that they're assigned to in their region. And they go over critical functions, what's happening. This is how the information is supposed to flow back and forth, and the state is to advise superintendents. They were all trained by the exact same body as these people. And this is how I believe that we are perpetuating policy that overrides law when it comes to child sex abuse within the schools.
100%.
Holy cow.
And those people don't come and go with elections.
No. No, and I think most people who are awake today understand that it's our unelected bureaucracies that are killing America, and have been since before 1920. So, I mean, but again, we can all complain about it and point it out. But if we're not going to do something about it, if we're not going to stand it against it, if we're not all going to be Ashleys, then shut up. I mean, what's the point of even bringing it up? So,
yes. So let me give you an example to illustrate what I'm talking about. And the RAO position, I don't want to say too much because I probably want to write about this. It is known to be the person that goes and puts their desk up on the superintendent's desk when they visit, and they
mean their feet up on the superintendent's.
I mean their feet up on the superintendent's desk, and they chew the fat for a while, and then they go back to the OSDE. That's kind of how it's always been.
Wow.
But the current superintendent of Western Heights was pulled into the OSDE. Was placed over at Shawnee as a principal for a little bit, but when at the OSDE before, Western Heights was in that department of regional accreditation officers. And we all know things have not gone well at Western Heights. They've been in a battle since the beginning when Walters came in about dangerous hiring practices. So I don't know if we have the best of the best advising our administrators or training them.
Yeah, but ultimately it comes down to one thing. It comes down to the school board. Shame on the school board. Shame on every single one of those school board members over there at Little Axe. You know that they knew what was going on. You know they have the power to remedy that entire situation, from the top admin and the superintendent all the way down through every single one of those school board members. Shame on every one of those people. They need to be publicly shamed and called out for the rest of their lives, because they allowed all this to happen. There's no way they didn't know about this. Even today, they know all this. So today they can come back out and they could say or do something and say, you know what, we knew about this. We're sorry. You guys should go look at all this stuff that's happened. Have they done it? No. Shame on every one of them.
So let me point something. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mary.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
So I was talking to a woman the other day who was a school board member, and actually two people who were school board members. And I said, so we were talking about OSSBA, and she said, and I didn't even utter the term. And she said, oh yeah, we have to have this OSSBA training. And basically all they do is just tell us to do whatever the superintendent says to do. And she said, and this girl, she goes, and I'm here to tell you that I looked up state law, and that's completely antithetical to what it says in the law.
Oh, that's so interesting.
And I was dying laughing. And I was like, isn't that funny how the law may say one thing, and yet if you're listening to somebody else, they can twist it to say whatever it wants, unless you take the personal responsibility to go find out what the law says.
It's
and
so true.
Again, as we've said 100 times, the law says the school board has all the power. You have the power to hire and fire the superintendent. You people do. So do it.
So absolutely. Michael, you always bring us back to a blinding flash of the obvious. And in Article 3 that just published yesterday, one of the things we talk about is when I was talking to someone who worked in the district office for many years and asked all those pointed questions about investigations, how nothing ever ended up in a file. And I said, who's really pulling the strings? And she gave me the name of a woman named Beverly Felton, who has been on the Little Axe School Board for 25 years. She was there when these things happened with these girls as sort of the vice president. Wow. And she is the current president. So I reached out to her. And honestly, as a resource, someone who's watched so many issues go through public education in Oklahoma and had to make so many decisions, that's an amazing resource to know what's going on, what's the thinking, how they're being trained. And I reached out and asked her if I could ask some questions about her experience. And she was open to a dialogue for sure. Okay. And then I asked questions about how these accusations of child sexual abuse by staff members were handled then, how they're handled now, and never heard back from her.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So it is an area that you're just sort of not allowed to question. And I think you can't solve it if everyone's always worried about being blamed. In the case of these coaches, like Ashley said, our statute of limitations extension to the age of 45 for victims is not retroactive. These men are not going to be prosecuted for these things that happened in Oklahoma years ago. Wouldn't it be refreshing if someone just told the truth?
Yeah, again, you have to have a set of cojones to do that. So, I think that's kind of where we are today. And I think that's probably the most disgusting point is you actually have men out there who literally won't protect women. They'd rather protect each other than protecting women.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, but I'm the old school gal. And, I'll do what I can, but I can't do what a man can. And I will protect myself as long as I can. But there are some times when somebody bigger and stronger than me needs to come in and do that for me. And it's pathetic.
Yep.
Pathetic.
Thank God for good men
who will not do
that's
that.
the good old boy system in Oklahoma. That's
still
the good
pathetic.
old boy system that That's why we're the last. We're literally the last in education because of the good old boy system. It's total protectionism.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Well,
I'm encouraged. I am encouraged by Ashley and
absolutely
the other grassroots parents groups like yourself and some of the Moms for Liberty groups and the Parents Voice groups. I think that they had a really big impact in what happened yesterday in the election.
I do too. I mean, amen and praise God for them. Absolutely. So, and if you guys if whoever got out and walked and helped, candidates, good for you. We're coming up on 30 minutes though. And I want you to, can you talk just a bit about what happened with our Moms for Liberty mom? Can you just encapsulate that?
I absolutely can. So there's a woman named Roberta Lewis who she founded a chapter in Pottawatomie County of the Moms for Liberty group after a concerning incident. Actually, it was more than an incident. It was a couple of weeks concerning her middle school son. And it started, I'll be as brief as possible. It started with a general letter out to all parents at Tecumseh schools regarding what was considered a national threat. It wasn't specific to Tecumseh schools. It was a TikTok sort of rumor about encouraging a challenge to shoot up your school kind of thing. So it was like this murmur. And they put out a letter to all of their parents at Tecumseh schools. And wouldn't you know, the very next day, all these rumors were swirling. So her son, this is a family of two, that both parents are veterans of the Army. They are like many other Oklahoma families who target shoot and hunt and teach their kids to responsibly handle weapons. And her son actually posted something that wasn't even on TikTok. It was on Snapchat, a video of a collectible handgun that they have, and was sort of doing the middle school boy thing, showing off about disassembling it and assembling it. Yeah. He claims to this day the gun was never, ever loaded. And at one point he pointed it at part of his body and just was talking about, can you imagine how much that would hurt, kind of a deal. Well, it turned into a series of events that the school jumped into. One particularly zealous teacher started pulling kids in. Stories, as middle schoolers will do, change. And she was called and asked to pick up her son. It was the day before Christmas break, and said, there's all kinds of rumors swirling around here. It'll die down by the time, quote, somebody breaks up with somebody. Will you just come get him? So she gets him. And then the sheriff shows up at her house. Then they've got DHS. Then there's OJA. Within a matter of hours, she is standing before a court that gives her 3 days to get her son into mental health treatment. So she goes home and starts calling those references. Then DHS is knocking on the door and they say, no, you got to go right now. We don't care what the court said, to get him assessed. And then 3 o'clock in the morning, he's being assessed over Zoom by SSM downtown in Oklahoma City. Of course, they've got to admit him. And this series of events happen that none can be documented in court orders. There's no record of that first court hearing that we can get our hands on. And then once the child's in SSM, they continue to threaten that they will do an in need of treatment INT order if she revokes her consent. She gets an attorney, she revokes her consent for him to be treated. This child, this woman documents like nothing I've ever seen. She provided me with an entire binder and recorded conversations of every ounce of this. They actually started making decisions for her son, overrode her parental rights, sort of claiming that they'd filed this thing in Oklahoma County courts that put him in DHS custody, and they never did.
Holy cow.
I know. Go and read the article. It is fascinating. They had to take the guns out of their house. There are parental rights issues here. There's overreach by court, law enforcement, mental health facilities, state agencies. And it's just a really disturbing story of how all of these agencies, sometimes you see nonprofits in these things, mental health, can combine and layer on, and they can completely override a parent. You can drop your kid off to school, and within hours, you can be fighting for their custody. So she's been a really big advocate for parents' rights since then. She says she never really wanted to jump into the education part of it, but Moms for Liberty really gave her an opportunity to talk about the broader picture. She's also precinct chair of her GOP. And at a GOP town hall that she hosted and fed everyone so that candidates could talk very recently, the deputy from the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office, who had been very involved in her son's case, came in with printed form and distributed the redacted copy of this minor's police report with another 5 pages attached of mental health risks to different people at the GOP meeting. And this is so interesting because I ended up actually having a conversation by email after the article came out. I talked with him before, the actual sheriff who's his boss. And I came in the end to understand that the law enforcement people there really think that they have the right to distribute the personal information of a minor. They aren't kidding with me. They really thought it. And they were arguing with me over email as I was saying, yeah, your community wants you to do better at this. No one's attacking you. They really said that if you wrote that report, he has every right to. And that is not what state law says. There are very specific restrictions on how you can distribute a citizen's personal information, and then hugely restrictive things about juvenile information, particularly criminal mental health. So it's, again, training, policy that has overridden the law. And I'm not slighting these men. The sheriff, who he's retiring now, and someone else is taking his place after last night, and he is an experienced man, experienced in law enforcement, but this is what they've been taught. So we went back and forth about platforms. I told them, don't focus on the platform, because I was saying, this is why OJA has a JOLT system. You can't get into it without access. You have to be assigned to the case, because we can't be throwing around juveniles' information because of the law. DHS has a system for adhering to this law. They have the KIDS system. You have to have any information from a case behind 2 different locks. It's got to be in your locked file cabinet. It's got to be in your locked office. You can't talk to non-assigned DHS workers about their information. There's nothing in law enforcement that's sort of telling them they hold this information in police reports and evidence. They don't get to pass it out willy-nilly. And this was just a strange political stunt that it just, people needed to be aware.
Well, that's honestly, there's some insanity there that I don't even know how to deal with. I can't even imagine what somebody was thinking about that. All right. Well, I hate to do this, but we're at 1 hour and 32, and okay. We've had a great audience this morning, and I don't want to overstay our welcome. So, please tell us what you have coming up, and if there's anything else that we need to be aware of, please, kind of close us out here, and we'll wait until next month unless something comes up.
Sure. Always go to visit.com. It's V1SUT.com, and you'll see, the article we just talked about, what we talked about with Ashley. We also had a really big Supreme Court decision that activists can't just slap protective orders and gag orders on us. Yes, that was big. Because we don't agree with them, and a lot about the grassroots movement and how they're really helping to push legislation. So take a look. We've got a lot coming up, and we will be in touch.
Thank you so much, Mary. We always appreciate having you. Can't wait to have you again next month, and we will talk to you again next month.
Thank you both. Appreciate it.
All right. We'll see you soon. That was horrifying. I mean, I'm just so, I don't even have words other than parents. You're in the driver's seat. We're never going to get, you have to be the person to advocate for your child, because nobody can do that any better than you. And the only way you can advocate for them is to know what's going on with them on a constant basis. So,
Yeah. Well, it's a tough deal, but you know what? I want to challenge Governor Stitt, who likes to make all these task forces. How about you make a task force specifically to go after, investigate, root out, and bring justice to every single one of these sexual, pedophilic, situations with these kids in these schools? Why don't you create a specific task force to actually do something and change education in the state of Oklahoma?
I vote for you, Michael.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I completely concur. We need to do something, and it needs to be done ASAP. All right. Thank you so much for being with us today, guys. We always appreciate everybody who is on, and thank you for those the commenters for today. We really appreciate that. Don't forget, these always stay up on our YouTube and our Rumble channel so that they're always there so that you can share these with other people. That's what we do. God told us, my people perish without knowledge. That's what we intend to do, is provide that knowledge, but you have to help us provide that knowledge in two ways: by passing this on to other people so you can enlighten them and open their eyes, and also by donating to us. It's not cheap to do this, sadly. I mean, the streaming software isn't free. Half of the things that we do require subscriptions and that kind of thing. So if you're inclined to donate, you can go to rope2.org. There's a big blue donate button right there. Hit it. Also, if you'd like to sign up for our newsletter, I try to get it out every Monday morning about 7 a.m. in the morning. So you've got it to use it whenever you can. If you want to sign up for that email, please go to rope2.org. When you land on the page, it'll come up and say, would you like to subscribe? And you'll say, of course I would. You type your name in there. We don't ever sell our information to anybody. We just keep it so that we can send you a newsletter of the recap of the week. So anything else before we close out?
That's it. Local school board. Got to take these school boards over. You want accountability? You want to stop these Ashley type situations? Local school board can stop all that. Amen.
All right. Thanks. And we'll be with you Friday. We'll have a replay, and our replay is going to be Monica Klein, who was a Planned Parenthood instructor for many years. And once she figured out that they were selling, that the Planned Parenthood was literally selling LGBTQ information to kids, and that's what they were doing inside public schools, she stopped and now talks to people about what is happening inside public schools with Planned Parenthood, and tries to get enlighten you so that you can stop it in your own school. So that's what'll be on Friday at 9:00 at our regular time. And we'll see you next Wednesday. Sign up for our newsletter to see who's going to be there. We'll talk to you later. Bye.